After Order 66, the galaxy was shrouded in chaos and uncertainty. The clone's swift and ruthless extermination of the Jedi Order, paired with the sudden dissolution of the Republic, left the Senate and countless citizens reeling. But in the midst of this darkness, a seed of defiance took root within the Senate chambers on Coruscant. Some senators, skeptical of the events surrounding the Jedi's sudden betrayal, began to question Chancellor Palpatine's actions and his unprecedented concentration of power. As whispers grew louder, disturbing rumors spread. Palpatine, the supposed savior of the Republic, might be far more than he appeared. The dark secret that he was, in fact, the Dark Lord of the Sith, came to light, sparking outrage and fear among the Senate. This revelation rippled across Coruscant. In a desperate bid to retain order and prevent Palpatine's complete control, a coalition of brave senators united, determined to reclaim the Republic. Bail Organa, Mon Mothma, and others spearheaded this effort, believing the Republic could still be salvaged. They realized that if Palpatine were indeed a Sith Lord, he would have been behind the manipulation that led to the Clone Wars, the assassination attempts, and perhaps even the corruption within the Senate itself. The senators, armed with this knowledge, resolved to expose Palpatine's treachery, understanding the incredible risk they were taking by defying him openly. But the truth about Palpatine's identity gave them a powerful weapon, the knowledge that they were, at last, fighting the true enemy of the Republic. While Palpatine had managed to weaken and all but destroy the Jedi, he was still wary of potential threats from scattered survivors and dissidents who could rally behind them. Unbeknownst to him, two of the Order's most formidable members, Master Yoda and Obi-Wan Kenobi, were not only alive but actively planning to exploit the Senate's newfound resistance. They recognized the opportunity this moment presented, the chance to strike back against the Sith and restore balance to the Force. Yoda and Obi-Wan were strategic and careful, understanding that their every move needed to be calculated to avoid falling into Palpatine's grasp. The galaxy's fear of the Sith's dark power worked to their advantage. The Senate's horror at Palpatine's revelation made them eager to listen to any allies who might help remove the Sith threat. They knew that by aligning themselves with the rebellious senators, they could amplify the resistance against Palpatine, even though this came with considerable risks. After all, they would not only be fighting the Sith but also a war machine of clones now loyal to their Dark Master. Nonetheless, they saw that with the Senate's rebellion, there was a slim chance they could turn the galaxy's fear and Palpatine's overreach into his undoing. Obi-Wan reached out to Bail Organa first, relying on the Senator's loyalty to the Republic and his past support for the Jedi Order. Bail was both shocked and heartened to learn that Obi-Wan had survived. He listened to Obi-Wan's assessment. The Senate's defiance alone would not be enough to stop Palpatine. They needed a rallying point, a figure who could restore the Republic's legitimacy and faith in the Jedi. Obi-Wan believed that Anakin Skywalker's fall had not been absolute and suggested that perhaps even now, a small part of him might be saved. But Yoda was skeptical, reminding Obi-Wan of the dark path Anakin had taken. For now, Yoda insisted their focus must be on eliminating the Sith threat, and then, perhaps they could consider how to address the new enigma of Darth Vader. With a plan in motion, Obi-Wan and Yoda worked with Bail and the senators, who began using clandestine communication channels to gather allies within the Senate, the remnants of the Jedi Order, and sympathetic citizens across the galaxy. These brave individuals began to pass along crucial intelligence, and slowly pockets of rebellion began to form, fueled by the knowledge that their chancellor was the dark enemy they had been fighting for years. In the heart of this uprising, Yoda and Obi-Wan became symbols of hope and resilience, quietly inspiring those willing to resist Palpatine's oppression. They became living proof that the Jedi, though nearly extinguished, were still fighting to defend peace and justice in the galaxy. As tensions mounted, Palpatine sensed the disturbance in the Senate. He had anticipated dissent but had never expected it to take shape so quickly and with such fervor. For years, he had meticulously undermined the Senate's authority and fostered division among them. But this revelation of his Sith identity had shocked even his most loyal supporters. Some had only tolerated Palpatine's iron grip on the Republic because they believed it was temporary, that it would last only until the Separatist threat was eliminated. The news that he was a Sith turned many senators' uncertainty into outright defiance. Palpatine attempted to crush this resistance with displays of power and intimidation, but he could not undo the seeds of rebellion that had been planted. His very presence became a grotesque reminder of the Republic's decay and the twisted face of absolute power. The Senate, though fractured, now faced a common enemy, one more terrifying and tangible than any enemy they had ever known. And with the guidance of Yoda and Obi-Wan, they began to turn the tide of fear into a weapon against him. As Obi-Wan and Yoda worked in the shadows, they recognized that their actions could not merely be defensive. They would need to counter Palpatine's power in ways that would capture the Senate's trust and ultimately the galaxy's. They guided the senators in a plan to reveal Palpatine's Sith identity more widely, to ignite outrage and expose him for the dark manipulator he truly was. Messages were transmitted across the galaxy, warning of Palpatine's true nature and calling for solidarity among the Republic's remaining systems. Their defiance grew bolder each day. Small acts of rebellion turned into coordinated strikes against Palpatine's regime, sabotaging his operations and weakening his grip on critical territories. The senators involved in these actions understood the mortal danger of their resistance, but with Yoda and Obi-Wan's counsel, they were able to evade Palpatine's countermeasures for the time being. The Jedi's return provided the inspiration the Senate needed to stand firm in the face of this darkness, and they became emboldened by the possibility that the Republic could still be saved. Obi-Wan and Yoda knew that their struggle would ultimately come to a confrontation with Palpatine himself. Their bond with the Jedi Order gave them a deeper understanding of the Force, one that the Sith's manipulation could never replicate. They knew that their actions would draw the Sith Lord's attention eventually, but they were prepared for the inevitable. Together, they began refining their strategies, exploring ways to exploit the weaknesses they saw in Palpatine's insatiable desire for control. However, the challenge they faced was immense. They were not only fighting against the Sith, but also against the propaganda that portrayed the Jedi as traitors. Yet the truth about Palpatine's identity began to change the minds of even those who had once doubted the Jedi's loyalty. Senators who had been indifferent or fearful began to see the Jedi not as adversaries but as protectors of the Republic. The rebellion grew, and with it, the hope that Palpatine could be defeated. On Coruscant, Palpatine's fortress of power, these rumblings of rebellion reached fever pitch. He summoned his forces, deploying loyalist senators and military units to crush any resistance. But the flames of defiance had already spread too far, and every attempt to quell it only further exposed his desperation. The more he tried to suppress the Senate's rebellion, the clearer his sinister nature became to those who had once viewed him as the Republic's protector. Palpatine began to see that the Jedi he had left alive were now the greatest threat to his empire. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but their resilience continued to defy him. The Dark Lord of the Sith could sense the disturbances rippling through the Force, an intangible, yet undeniable warning of the danger that Yoda and Obi-Wan represented. He could feel the weight of their presence bearing down upon him, a constant reminder that his grip on power was no longer as secure as he had believed. The resistance had gained momentum, and Palpatine knew he would have to confront this threat head-on if he was to maintain control. But in the face of overwhelming odds, Yoda and Obi-Wan persisted, bolstered by the unity and courage of the Senate and the belief that the Force was with them. They knew the risks, but they also understood that for the galaxy to be free, they would need to remove the darkness that had corrupted it. The Senate's defiance had given them an opening, one they would exploit to its fullest potential. And as they prepared for the battles that lay ahead, Yoda and Obi-Wan sensed that the Republic's redemption might yet be within their grasp. With the Senate's rebellion growing stronger by the day, Palpatine realized that merely dispatching clone troopers to suppress uprisings would no longer be enough. The galaxy was now engulfed in whispers of his true identity, and those whispers were turning into rallying cries. Despite his power, Palpatine knew the nature of fear and manipulation well, how easily both could turn against even the mightiest ruler. And now, with Yoda and Obi-Wan working in the shadows, the Sith Lord found himself confronted with a challenge that brute force alone could not conquer. Yoda and Obi-Wan took full advantage of the Senate's newfound awareness, using the momentum of Palpatine's exposed identity to bolster their cause. Through Bail Organa and other trusted allies within the Senate, they crafted carefully timed broadcasts and messages. These messages were not only declarations of resistance but statements of hope, aimed at igniting the spirits of countless citizens who longed for the Republic's restoration. The Senate's rebellion, spurred on by the truth of Palpatine's dark nature, began resonating far beyond Coruscant. Planetary leaders across the galaxy received encrypted transmissions, learning of the Sith's deception and the Jedi's resilience. The message was clear: the Republic still had champions who were willing to fight for it. Palpatine's response was swift but telling. He launched public campaigns to label the Jedi as seditionists and continued to spread propaganda that painted them as the very reason for the Republic's downfall. But the senators, now emboldened by their alliance with Yoda and Obi-Wan, openly questioned these narratives. Senators like Mon Mothma and Bail Organa delivered speeches on the Senate floor, demanding transparency and accountability from Palpatine, urging the Republic's remaining loyalists to see the truth for themselves. They revealed documents and recordings, slowly unraveling the carefully constructed lies Palpatine had used to cement his grip on the galaxy. Meanwhile, Yoda and Obi-Wan worked tirelessly to recruit former Jedi allies, those who had managed to survive the horrors of Order 66 and escape Palpatine's purge. Though their numbers were small, their presence was invaluable. Yoda reached out through the Force, calling upon lost Jedi, while Obi-Wan focused on building alliances with senators who believed in the Order's mission. As these remnants of the Jedi Order gathered, they began to coordinate with the Senate's resistance efforts, forming a unified front against Palpatine's forces. Their goal was to reclaim the Republic, but they knew they had to weaken Palpatine's influence over the galaxy before they could fully restore it. Palpatine, sensing the extent of the threat, summoned Darth Vader to quash this rebellion. The Sith Lord knew that his enforcer's terrifying presence would send a powerful message. To defy the Emperor was to risk annihilation. Yet this decision also revealed Palpatine's desperation. By deploying Vader, Palpatine was showing the galaxy just how deeply the Jedi's survival had shaken him. The dark power he wielded was now on display for all to see, making it clear that he was no mere politician or protector, but the harbinger of the dark side's will. In the midst of this turmoil, Obi-Wan and Yoda strategized how best to use Darth Vader's presence against Palpatine himself. Obi-Wan, haunted by the knowledge of Anakin's fate, saw an opportunity to attempt to reach what little humanity might remain within Vader. He believed that if Anakin could be turned back to the light, it could shift the balance of power within the galaxy. However, Yoda was cautious, recognizing the profound danger in confronting Vader. He believed that any engagement with the Sith would be an all-or-nothing battle, one that could only end with victory or death. Despite their differing perspectives, the two Jedi Masters agreed on a plan to expose Palpatine's influence and weaken his forces by challenging the Sith openly. In one critical move, Yoda and Obi-Wan, alongside their Senate allies, arranged for a coordinated attack on one of Palpatine's key installations on Coruscant. The goal was not only to disrupt his power base, but to send a message to the galaxy: the Jedi had not vanished, nor had they abandoned their duty to the Republic. The strike was meticulously planned, combining the precision of the Jedi's tactics with the Senate's resources and intelligence. Senators and Jedi worked hand in hand, pooling their knowledge to dismantle the infrastructure that supported Palpatine's control over the Republic. The attack was swift and brutal, but it was also symbolic, showing the galaxy that Palpatine's reign could indeed be challenged. The assault struck fear into Palpatine, not because of the damage to his assets, but because it demonstrated the strength of the alliance forming against him. The Jedi, whom he had believed to be all but extinct, had become a symbol of resilience that he could not easily erase. For years, he had relied on the belief that the Jedi Order was gone, their principles crushed beneath the weight of the Empire's might. But the continued resistance, led by Yoda and Obi-Wan, showed the galaxy that the light of the Jedi had not been extinguished. This defiance rattled Palpatine, forcing him to divert his resources and focus on crushing this resistance. In response, he unleashed a wave of terror on Coruscant and other Republic worlds, deploying clones and loyalist forces to root out Jedi sympathizers and crush any hint of rebellion. But this overreach had unintended consequences. The heavier his hand fell, the more civilians began to turn against him, resentful of the Empire's oppression. People across the galaxy began to see that the Jedi were not the traitors they had been painted as, but the defenders of a lost republic that had once represented peace and justice. Despite the chaos and danger surrounding them, Yoda and Obi-Wan were relentless, adapting their tactics and using Palpatine's aggression to their advantage. They knew that Palpatine's wrath was an opportunity to stoke the fires of rebellion even further. Each oppressive measure, each brutal crackdown, only served to rally more citizens to the cause. Ordinary people, planetary militias, and defecting soldiers joined the resistance, swayed by the courage of the Jedi and the Senate's defiance. However, the shadow of Darth Vader loomed ever closer. As Vader pursued leads across the galaxy, he grew increasingly aware of the Jedi's involvement in the Senate's uprising. He could feel Obi-Wan's presence through the Force, an unsettling reminder of his past. Vader's internal struggle mirrored the larger battle between the Empire and the Resistance, as his connection to Obi-Wan pulled at the remnants of Anakin Skywalker buried deep within him. But Palpatine, sensing this conflict, doubled down on his control over Vader, manipulating him with visions of betrayal and promises of ultimate power. For Palpatine, Vader was not just an enforcer but a symbol of fear, a weapon to strike terror into those who dared to oppose him. Yoda, aware of the growing threat Vader posed, advised the Senate leaders to avoid direct confrontation with him, focusing instead on targeting Palpatine's infrastructure and support networks. By isolating Palpatine's forces and disrupting his command centers, they hoped to weaken his hold on the galaxy without risking a devastating showdown with Vader. But Obi-Wan was conflicted, knowing that one day he would have to face his former apprentice. He hoped against hope that there might still be a chance to redeem Anakin, despite the darkness that now consumed him. As the resistance spread, the galaxy began to echo with the rallying cry for freedom from Sith tyranny. The Senate, once fractured and submissive, became the symbol of defiance. Every strike against Palpatine, every whisper of rebellion, chipped away at the Empire's control, weakening Palpatine's influence bit by bit. The combined efforts of the Senate and the Jedi pushed the boundaries of Palpatine's power, testing the limits of his control and exposing his vulnerabilities. Yet Palpatine would not be so easily defeated. He initiated one final, devastating attempt to crush the resistance on Coruscant, assembling an overwhelming force to quash the uprising once and for all. But Yoda, Obi-Wan, and their Senate allies had anticipated this. They prepared an elaborate plan to lure Palpatine into a trap where his own arrogance and overconfidence could become his undoing. The Jedi were no longer simply fighting to survive. They were fighting to dismantle the very foundation of the Sith's hold over the galaxy. As the climactic battle drew near, Yoda and Obi-Wan took a final moment to reflect on all they had lost and all they were fighting to restore. They knew that, regardless of the outcome, their actions had already set a powerful example. They had shown the galaxy that resistance was possible, that darkness could be challenged, and that the Republic's ideals could live on even in the face of the Sith's shadow. The galaxy braced itself for the decisive confrontation, watching as the forces of light and darkness prepared to clash in an epic struggle for the Republic's soul. The trap was set. Yoda and Obi-Wan, along with their Senate allies, had coordinated every detail meticulously. Coruscant, the heart of Palpatine's empire, had become a battleground in which the forces of defiance now fought openly against the Sith's oppressive rule. The Senate, defying the Empire openly, had called for a day of reckoning, a declaration that they would no longer submit to tyranny. Citizens across Coruscant took to the streets in a show of unity, determined to reclaim their world from Palpatine's grasp. Under the leadership of Bail Organa and Mon Mothma, the resistance mounted a coordinated attack on the Empire's control centers, launching strikes that would cripple its hold over the planet. Palpatine, confident in his power and convinced of his invincibility, did not hesitate. He mobilized the largest deployment of clone troopers Coruscant had ever seen, determined to drown the rebellion in blood. He believed that a show of overwhelming force would be enough to crush this uprising, and that the Jedi, his greatest remaining threat, would not dare face him directly. But Palpatine underestimated the sheer tenacity and resolve of those he oppressed. The resistance was ready for him. As the battle raged across Coruscant, the Senate chambers and the halls of power shook with the thunder of explosions and blaster fire. Yoda and Obi-Wan fought strategically, using every tactic they had learned in their years of service. They knew that a direct confrontation with Palpatine was unavoidable, but they needed to weaken him first, to strip away his defenses. They and their allies staged attacks on key locations, drawing Palpatine's forces away from the Imperial Palace. Clone divisions, distracted and spread thin by the coordinated rebellion, were less prepared than ever to protect their master. Palpatine could feel the shift in the Force. He sensed the Jedi's presence, the concentrated unity of light and darkness as it converged upon him. He saw the future in fragments, glimpses of an impending struggle that could challenge even his power. Realizing the true threat, he summoned Darth Vader, ordering him to eliminate Yoda and Obi-Wan once and for all. The Dark Lord's instructions were clear. He was to find the Jedi Masters and kill them without hesitation, to ensure that Palpatine's empire would stand unchallenged. Vader, guided by an implacable will to serve his master, scoured the battleground, hunting down the two Jedi with a ferocity that sent waves of fear through all who witnessed him. The clash between the Jedi and Vader was inevitable, and when it finally came, the galaxy seemed to hold its breath. Obi-Wan, determined to face his former friend, stepped forward to confront Vader, his heart weighed by the memory of Anakin and the man he had once been. Obi-Wan understood that this confrontation might end in tragedy, yet he also knew that his duty was to protect the Republic from the Sith, even if it meant fighting the one he had once trained and called his brother. The two clashed in a battle that epitomized the very struggle of the galaxy, light against dark, hope against despair. Vader, fueled by the dark side and his unwavering loyalty to Palpatine, fought with relentless power, his every strike a brutal reminder of the darkness that had claimed him. But Obi-Wan fought with precision and resilience, using every lesson he had learned as a Jedi Master to counter Vader's overwhelming aggression. Their duel was both ferocious and heartbreaking, a testament to the tragic path that had brought them to this moment. Meanwhile, Yoda knew his own confrontation with Palpatine was at hand. As Obi-Wan engaged Vader, Yoda made his way to the Imperial Palace, slipping through its labyrinthine halls with quiet determination. Palpatine awaited him, seated upon his throne, cloaked in darkness and brimming with confidence. The Sith Lord sensed Yoda's approach, a disturbance in the Force that stirred him to malevolent anticipation. He welcomed the challenge, certain that his mastery of the dark side would easily overpower even Yoda's formidable strength. When Yoda entered the throne room, a silence fell over the chamber. The diminutive Jedi Master, standing in stark contrast to the grandiose power of the Sith Lord before him, seemed almost insignificant. But Palpatine knew better than to underestimate Yoda. The two had faced each other once before, and this time there would be no escape, no mercy. The clash of their powers reverberated through the Force, a titanic struggle that sent waves of energy echoing across Coruscant. The ancient enemies, symbols of light and dark, faced each other with the full weight of their convictions. The duel between Yoda and Palpatine was a battle unlike any other. Each strike, each maneuver was laced with decades of experience, every step calculated to exploit the other's weaknesses. Palpatine's dark power filled the room, crackling with malice and fury, while Yoda's mastery of the Force shone through his swift and precise movements. The two clashed with an intensity that seemed to shake the very foundations of the Imperial Palace. Each refused to yield, their powers locked in a dance of life and death that would decide the fate of the galaxy. As the battles raged on two fronts, Obi-Wan against Vader and Yoda against Palpatine, the resistance on Coruscant surged forward, emboldened by the knowledge that the Jedi were with them. The rebellion, strengthened by these courageous figures, pressed harder, taking ground and striking blows that weakened the Empire's control. Across the galaxy, citizens watched, their hope renewed by the bravery of those who stood against the Sith. For the first time since Order 66, the galaxy dared to believe that the Sith might be defeated, that Palpatine's reign of terror could end. But Palpatine's power was overwhelming. As the duel with Yoda reached its peak, the Sith Lord unleashed a torrent of dark energy, pressing his advantage with a ruthlessness that seemed boundless. Yoda, though battered and weary, stood firm, his resolve unbreakable. He knew that he was fighting not only for himself or the Jedi Order, but for the countless lives at stake. Each deflected blow, each counterstrike, was a testament to his unwavering commitment to the Republic and to the balance of the Force. On the other side of Coruscant, Obi-Wan's duel with Vader was reaching its own brutal climax. Obi-Wan, wounded and exhausted, found himself at the mercy of Vader's relentless assault. The dark side had consumed Anakin, leaving only the monstrous presence of Darth Vader, whose fury was as unyielding as his loyalty to the Emperor. Obi-Wan, however, managed to find a small moment of clarity, a brief pause that allowed him to look upon Vader not with hatred but with profound sadness. In that instant, Obi-Wan made a choice to spare himself from further suffering and to preserve his hope that one day the light could reach Anakin once more. With a final act of defiance, he disengaged from the battle, vanishing into the shadows and retreating to regroup with the Resistance. Palpatine, witnessing Vader's temporary failure, knew that his Empire's foundation was now at risk. The defiance of the Jedi and the Senate had exposed weaknesses he could no longer ignore. The Resistance was gaining traction, fueled by the example of those who had defied him. The citizens of Coruscant, emboldened by the chaos around them, began to resist openly, rallying behind the belief that the Jedi and the Senate would liberate them from the Sith. Realizing the depth of the crisis, Palpatine summoned the last of his loyalists, consolidating his power and preparing for a decisive confrontation. He would either crush this rebellion entirely or risk seeing his empire crumble. As he steeled himself for the final conflict, he felt the disturbance in the Force a sign that the Jedi were far from defeated. The final battle loomed. The forces of the Empire and the Resistance, backed by the determination of the Jedi and the defiant spirit of the Senate, prepared to clash one last time. Palpatine, desperate and vengeful, committed every resource to ensuring his empire's survival. But Yoda and Obi-Wan, their hope renewed by the resilience of the people they had fought to protect, stood ready. They knew that the road ahead would be perilous, but they also knew that the light within the galaxy, the ideals of the Republic and the legacy of the Jedi Order, was worth fighting for. And as the galaxy held its breath, awaiting the final confrontation, the spirit of the Jedi burned brighter than ever, a beacon of hope against the dark tyranny of the Sith. As the final battle commenced, the Resistance surged with an intensity fueled by hope and desperation. The streets of Coruscant transformed into a war zone where citizens, senators, and former soldiers rallied together against the oppressive might of the Empire. The cityscape, once a beacon of civilization, was now a field of rebellion, with fires lighting the skyline and the sounds of blasters echoing through the air. Palpatine's forces clashed with the Resistance in a brutal confrontation, but the unity of the Republic's defenders grew stronger, fortified by the knowledge that Yoda, Obi-Wan, and the remnants of the Jedi were fighting alongside them. In the heart of the chaos, Palpatine felt the pressure mounting. His clone troopers, though numerous and loyal, were beginning to falter against the sheer will of the rebellion. The people of Coruscant, once complacent under the Empire's rule, were now galvanized, driven by the belief that they could, at last, free themselves from the Sith's grip. Palpatine watched the rebellion unfold with growing fury, realizing that his dark influence over the galaxy was not as absolute as he had once believed. In a final, desperate attempt to quell the uprising, Palpatine called for reinforcements from Imperial forces across the galaxy. But the message that had spread that the Emperor was, in fact, a Sith Lord reached the ears of soldiers and commanders alike, seeding doubt and fear among them. Some refused the call, unwilling to fight for a ruler they now saw as a traitor to the Republic's ideals. Others defected, joining the Resistance and pledging their loyalty to the cause of freedom. Palpatine's empire was cracking, and the cracks were spreading rapidly. As the Resistance surged, Yoda and Obi-Wan knew the time had come for a final strike against Palpatine himself. They could feel the shift in the Force, a convergence of light and dark that would determine the fate of the galaxy. Gathering a small team of their most trusted allies, including Bail Organa and Mon Mothma, they prepared for a daring assault on the Imperial Palace, aiming to confront the Sith Lord directly and bring an end to his reign. Obi-Wan, still haunted by his duel with Vader, was resolute. He knew that the final confrontation with Palpatine would not only decide the Empire's fate but also determine the future of the Jedi and the Republic. Yoda, though aged and wearied by the battles he had endured, drew strength from the knowledge that he was fighting for a cause greater than himself. The two Jedi, united by purpose, moved through the palace's defenses, making their way toward Palpatine's throne room for the final showdown. But Palpatine was prepared. He sensed their approach, his mind brimming with dark power as he awaited their arrival. The throne room was silent, shadowed in darkness, the air thick with malice. As Yoda and Obi-Wan entered, Palpatine rose from his throne, his figure cloaked in robes that seemed to absorb the light, his eyes burning with a sinister fire, fixed on the two Jedi with a gaze of pure hatred. "So you've come to die at last," Palpatine sneered, his voice dripping with venom. "I was merciful to leave you alive this long, but your resistance ends here, and with it, the last remnants of the Jedi Order." Obi-Wan met Palpatine's gaze without flinching. "The Republic will not fall to the Sith. You may have fooled the galaxy, but your lies have been exposed. The people of Coruscant have seen the truth, and they will fight until you are defeated." Yoda's voice, calm yet powerful, broke through the tension. "End this tyranny must. Light in the galaxy restore we will. Your rule, Emperor, finished it is." Palpatine's response was a wave of dark energy, lashing out with all the fury of the Sith. The duel began, a clash of powers that reverberated through the Force. Yoda and Obi-Wan fought with a synergy born of trust and experience, countering Palpatine's dark strikes with movements that seemed almost choreographed, their bond as Jedi masters deepening their strength. But Palpatine's mastery of the dark side was formidable, and his attacks were relentless, each blow calculated to shatter their defenses and overwhelm them with sheer force. Outside the palace, the resistance continued to press forward, inspired by the knowledge that their leaders were fighting for them. The rebellion had become more than a battle for Coruscant, it had become a symbol of hope for the entire galaxy. News of the uprising spread quickly, and soon systems across the galaxy began to rise against the Empire, defying Palpatine's rule and pledging support to the cause of freedom. The Empire's control, once seemingly unbreakable, was now slipping as rebellion flared on planets from the core worlds to the outer rim. Within the throne room, the battle grew fiercer. Yoda, wielding his lightsaber with a mastery that belied his age, struck with precision and strength, countering Palpatine's dark power with a determination that could not be extinguished. Obi-Wan fought beside him, his focus unwavering as he matched Palpatine's strikes, the memory of Anakin's fall fueling his resolve. The two Jedi, though exhausted, fought with a unity that pushed Palpatine to his limits. Sensing his advantage slipping, Palpatine unleashed a surge of Sith lightning, a storm of dark energy that filled the room with crackling light. Obi-Wan and Yoda braced themselves, channeling the Force to shield against the onslaught. But Palpatine's fury only grew, his attacks more vicious as he tried to overpower them. In that moment, Yoda saw an opening, a fleeting vulnerability in Palpatine's defense. With a swift, decisive strike, Yoda lunged forward, his lightsaber blazing as he aimed for the Sith Lord's heart. But Palpatine deflected the blow at the last moment, his dark power shielding him from the killing strike. He countered with a blast of energy that sent Yoda staggering, but the moment of weakness cost him. Obi-Wan seized the opportunity, striking with all his might, his lightsaber clashing against Palpatine's in a flurry of sparks. The struggle was intense, and for a moment it seemed as if Palpatine's dark power might prevail. But the Force itself seemed to favor the Jedi, their unity and purpose granting them strength beyond measure. With a final surge of power, Yoda and Obi-Wan broke through Palpatine's defenses, their combined strikes forcing the Sith Lord back. Palpatine, his composure shattered, roared in fury as he realized he could no longer hold them at bay. In a final desperate act, Palpatine attempted to summon a storm of dark energy, intending to obliterate the Jedi and the Resistance along with him. But Yoda, drawing upon every ounce of his strength, countered the Sith's attack, channeling the Force in a concentrated wave that overwhelmed Palpatine's dark power. The clash reached a crescendo, the throne room bathed in blinding light as the Force erupted in a final surge of energy. When the light faded, Palpatine lay defeated, his dark power extinguished. The Sith Lord, who had once held the galaxy in his grasp, had been overthrown by the very republic he had sought to destroy. Yoda and Obi-Wan stood victorious, their victory a testament to the resilience of the Jedi and the unbreakable will of the people who had fought beside them. As news of Palpatine's fall spread, the galaxy erupted in celebration. The Empire's grip on power shattered, and worlds across the galaxy reclaimed their independence, pledging allegiance to a restored republic. The Senate, free from the shadow of the Sith, began the arduous task of rebuilding, determined to create a government that would honor the principles of peace and justice that the Jedi had fought to protect. Yoda and Obi-Wan, though victorious, knew that their work was far from over. They had won a great battle, but the scars of the Sith's influence would take years to heal. Yet they looked upon the galaxy with renewed hope, knowing that the light of the Republic had been restored. The Jedi Order, though diminished, would rise again, carrying forward the legacy of those who had fallen. Yoda and Obi-Wan pledged to guide the new generation of Jedi, ensuring that the lessons of the past would not be forgotten. And as they watched the dawn rise over Coruscant, they knew that the balance they had fought for had finally been restored.